As most of you may know, that song um, is from The Wiz. So a updated, modern telling of The Wizard of Oz. So in that honor, I wore my red shoes. Because one of the great simple lessons, there's no place like home, there's no place like home. And Glinda the Good Witch says, well, all you need to do is click your shoes. Home is a consciousness. Home is not necessarily a place. Anywhere that you go, you can find home. So, welcome home. It's so good to have you with us. So the title of my talk is Pull Up a Chair. So I brought another prop. There was a period in my life where, I don't know if you heard that old adage, if you don't have anything nice to say, come sit by me. I'm now a minister, so that rings less true. Although, and if you do come sit next to me, we can have a conversation and we can sort of work through it sometimes, right? The other way that I've been known to use a chair is if there's conflict. I put the chair between me and the conflict. It's something that I just don't like. It's something that I wasn't really comfortable with. But a chair is a chair, and each chair is different, and we use them different ways. So I thought I'd actually just start a little bit with this chair. So this is a chair that was constructed and crafted by Morris Varsuvian, a really brilliant cabinet maker, furniture maker, third generation cabinet maker. And for him, he didn't go to church. His church was his workroom. And every Sunday, you could find him there, working with his tools. And he learned so much about life by working with wood, working with ideas, bringing them into form. And so this was a chair that he created. It's based on Thomas Chippendale. To clarify, not the Chippendale dancers. That's a whole other talk, which Dr. James would probably be better doing. But Thomas Chippendale was a British furniture maker and did a catalog of furniture designs. What Morris did is he actually took elements from, I believe, 6 different chairs, little details, and he merged them all together to create his own creation from it. I think of that as Dr. James would say, the quantum realm, the oversoul, where all things are known, all things are possible, all things are fully formulated in this mind of God, in this creative field of possibilities. And then individually, we get to pull different individuals and put them together in our life. So this chair is actually assembled with mortise and tenons. So these wood elements go into the hole, and it's an old world craftsmanship to hold the chair together. Typically, it would be glued. And so when I'm thinking of that, of like tendons, mortise and tenon, and I think of tendon, that thing within our body that holds the muscle to the bone. That's what keeps us moving around. But then my mind goes to tendency. So from tenon to tendency, the law of tendency. How do we use our minds? What is the atmosphere that we create in our life? Because that tendency, what we put our attention on grows. So when we are putting our over 51%, closer to 72%, 87%, 92% of our focus on the good in our life, finding the gratitude for all that has come into our life, then that's what our experience will grow and be. And again, A chair, like a table, like life, sometimes can get a little messy. This chair is definitely a little creaky, would need some work, would need some upholstery if I actually wanted to sit on it, or needless to say, if I wanted to stand up on it. In fact, this leg was missing, so this week I had one of my carvers carve a new leg so I can assemble it together. And I find it kind of liberating if using this as a metaphor for life. It's not that pretty. I mean, it's beautiful, it's dirty, it's water stained, it's not the most stable, but to me, that's kind of how life is. We live in a world where, with Instagram, with keeping up with the Joneses, there is a tendency of spiritual bypass, of it's all good. Let's just put a coat of paint on it. Let's lacquer it up so everyone thinks it's really good and really pretty. Because I want the outside to see this is a really beautiful table. Look at the beautifully sanded legs. Truth of the matter is, this is a water-stained leg. This has lived some life. Just like my life has lived some life. Some of it's not the prettiest. Sometimes some people may like it, some people may not, but this is who I am. You know, a mental muscle, my word is unapologetic. To be unapologetically me. And that means a willingness to be able to show up and really look at all the different aspects in my life. You know, right now I would say this one would be my weakest leg. It's relationships. You know, I've got a lot of great, wonderful friendships. I have a great community here. And I also would acknowledge that that's one leg that I'd like to have more stable. You know, maybe this is just a little too delicate. Maybe I want a more substantial leg in my life when it comes to relationships and to home. Let me pull up some of my notes here. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Every chair should be a throne and hold a king." How often do we minimize the chair that we live in or that we sit on, the home that we live in a one-bedroom apartment, or we've got 20,000 square foot house, but is that house a home? You know, those are the different things. Wherever you are, can you be royalty for yourself? Can you be a king? Can it be a throne, regardless of how stable it is or not? When I went to Uganda with Karen Wright, which was such a treat this past spring, I was taken back. I think I've spoken about, going into some of the innermost villages in northern Uganda and going in and seeing these mud huts. And in my mind, like, oh my God, how does a family live in a hut 12 feet across? And then realizing, well, actually the hut isn't the house. The hut represented a room, and a collection of huts represents the house. And then the collection of the collections represents the village. But it was my concept, it was my precept, my perception of what a house was. I have a client right now who grew up very, very poor. In fact, his space was sleeping under the dining room table. That was his home. That was his bedroom. He now lives in Beverly Hills in the flats in a 22,000 square foot house. And yet, he still remains the boy who sleeps under the table. He's a grown man, a multi-billionaire, owns a good section of downtown Los Angeles. But in his mind, there's still that part of where he comes from in terms of the fear, the lack of it all could be taken away. Now his wife, she's a woman of celebration. You know, Persian celebrations are, about food, about family, about flowers, about all of it. There's an elegance and an extravagance. So for her, that's what the dining table represents. For him, it represents something that, I could lose it all. And to the outsider, it's a 28-foot table, room, a place for everyone. Maya Angelou says, I believe that one can never leave home. I believe that one carries the shadows, the dreams, the fears, and the dragons of home under one's skin. At the extreme corners of one's eyes and possibly in the gristle of the earlobe. So it's that concept of home. I remember growing up, all I wanted to do was leave. I wanted to get away from home. I wanted to go away to school. I just wanted to explore and experience something other than what I had known as my life, to figure it out. And then the older I get, all I want to do is go back home, to experience home. So home is always with us. Emily Dixon says, where thou art, that is home. And Benjamin Franklin says, a house is not a home unless it contains food and fire for the mind as well as for the body. And so that's one of the opportunities of, with this teaching that has enriched my life, is taking classes, connecting at a intellectual capacity, and as well as a heartfelt capacity. So building a chair, I realized that it's falling apart. There are times where there are woodworkers, and then there are furniture makers. There are true craftsmen. And it reminds me of that old parable of the masons, of Christopher Wren, I believe, in England, was traveling through a village, and he saw three men, and he went up and asked them, and he asked the first gentleman, what is it that you're doing? He said, oh, I'm breaking and cutting stone. Said, okay, great. Went to the second person and said, what are you doing? Oh, I'm putting together a wall. And went to the third person and said, I'm building a cathedral. They were all doing the same job, perhaps, but what they held in their heart, what they saw of themselves, was very different. So they had a very different experience. This Thanksgiving weekend, I had the opportunity to sit at a table to dine. In fact, I was invited to several different tables, and I was grateful to acknowledge the fact that I get to choose at which table I want to sit, what is being served, and with whom I wanted to dine with. The work for me is, who am I showing up as I sit at the table? Am I showing up as my most fully authentic person? Am I willing to show up with the water-stained legs being seen? The work for me continues to be, am I willing to show up and invite those parts of me that I've long ignored? The young adolescent boy who felt unworthy and unlovable. Can I invite him up and say, there's a chair at this table for you? Can I invite the wins and successes at the table, as well as some of the grief that I carry? Am I willing to show up? Are each of us willing to show up wholly and incorporate all that we are, and know that we are worthy of sitting at the table? And as Ralph Waldo Emerson said, that seat can be your throne. Namaste.